So all that then basically leads to AI not working, unclarity of are we even doing the right things with AI, and not being able to do it because we don't have the right skills and technologies coming together. The reason being that most of the failures anyway are being traced back to a human decision that was made a while ago or that was really directional for that AI initiative. Buying tools has always been easier than making a proper transformation within a company, right? It has always been easier just to sign a check and then basically get a tool in place and suddenly you can click on it and play with it instead of actually making it adopted and doing the work, right, of actually it becoming valuable.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raygada. I'm a data and AI strategist and your host for Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world. And today we're going to talk about the human side of AI readiness. So, welcome back to this episode where the data meets the real world. So, this is the space where we move past shiny demos, technical promises, all these talks about what actually determines whether data and AI initiatives succeed or basically fail. So today's question is one I hear constantly. Why do AI initiatives fail, even when organizations have supposedly good data? But because of AI readiness isn't just about tools, models, infrastructure, it's about people, trust, decisions, and the systems in which AI is introduced. To unpack this, I'm joined by someone very special, my dear friend who has spent years working at this intersection between tech and people and the human behavior. I'm really happy to welcome Tiankai Feng today to the show. Tiankai is the director for data and AI strategy and researcher known for his work on social technical systems, data mesh, organizational readiness, of course, a book author. Probably most of you read it already. And what makes his perspective especially valuable for me is that he consistently zooms out beyond models, architectures to look how technology teams, incentives, processes, and culture interact together. Tiankai usually challenges the idea that AI readiness can be installed, and instead he framed it as something the organizations have to develop over time with the people around. Tiankai, welcome, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be in Data Reality Check.
Yeah. Hi, Amy. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I want to start with the assumption we hear all the time. We have good data. We are ready for AI. We want agentic AI is the new stuff, right? That you hear all the time.
Exactly.
And yet, many AI initiatives still fail and they never make it past the pilots. From your perspective, what usually the organizations are missing when they make these assumptions? What is off with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are many AI readiness frameworks out there by the time we're speaking, right? And I think a lot of companies have come up with their own ways of doing a checklist. All of them, I think, have one thing in common, which is they mainly answer two questions, ideally, in the right way. One is, are we doing the right things with AI? And are we doing the right things in the right way with AI? Right? Those are mainly the two questions that it usually comes down to. And that is where it gets interesting, right? Because when we talk about are we doing the right things with AI, that doesn't only have the business case flavor of it all, but it has also a mindset flavor, right? Because people need to actually agree on everyone that is the right thing to do. And that makes them prioritize it and actually be motivated to follow that prioritization to actually generate value. Which is why for me, it's so important to have that human aspect and the technological business aspect to it as well. And are we doing things the right way has also technological and a skill set flavor to it, right? One is, do we have the right tools and the right technologies, of course, in place? But also, do we even have the right capabilities and the right skills to even do it, right? So many companies just think magically we have now the right people with the right mindset and the right skill set to just do AI. But many times it's not there, right? It's very inconsistent. We just let people learn on their own and we don't give them a structure of what is now important actually to do. And then we end up having like a very, let's say, inconsistent landscape of skills and knowledge across it. And then doesn't it really help? So all that then basically leads to AI not working, right? So unclarity of are we even doing the right things with AI and not being able to do it because we don't have the right skills and technologies coming together. And those are things that I think a lot of companies don't immediately think of because it's really almost a secret for them, right? Only the companies know themselves if they're able to do it or not. So any external party usually has a harder time to actually see it immediately from the outside.
I completely agree because I see a lot of disconnection between people and technology. You know that I like to use usually my talks like the people, process, and technology, but I see
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
lot of disconnection in there, as you said. Not long ago, I was working with a client, and then they have these researchers, data scientists, and
Right.
then they have some software engineers that they say, okay, now you're going to implement whatever we want because product wanted the most shiniest product with AI and agents. And
Hmm.
usually it doesn't work like that, right? It's like, is the data ready? That's one check. Is the people ready? Because if you're a software engineer, you might not know all the AI governance part of things, right? All the guardrails, all the implications. So if you leave software engineers doing things by themselves and you don't skill them up, probably this is not going to work neither, or it's going to stay stuck in the pilot, as I said at the
Right.
beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that you emphasize a lot is that AI systems are socio-technical systems, not
Hmm.
just technical ones. Let's
Yeah.
unpack a little bit of that. What do you mean by this in practice, or what have you seen with different clients or experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, with what we now are using AI a lot for is really to automate things in a smart way, right? And maybe in contrast to what data was supposed to do, I always say that while data was helping to improve decisions, but the decisions were still human, and then we would act on it. Now AI is capable of taking these actions as well on behalf of human beings, right? So that takes it to the next level. And because it then comes down to what tasks are we handing over to AI and let AI do, and what tasks are we not handing over to AI, this is where it gets really interesting about what the relationship between human beings and AI is, right? And I think there's a lot of the narrative, and especially we see in the industry a lot of layoffs because of AI, right? I mean, it's debatable how much of that is an excuse and how much of that is reality. But AI is being used as a narrative to replace people. Whereas in reality, I believe it's more of an evolution of what human beings and what jobs of human beings actually will look like, right? Because for all of the tedious and repetitive tasks that AI will take over and will be able to automate on our behalf, what is left is a lot of the orchestration work and the critical thinking work that we as human beings still need to do, and being the subject matter expert and the human in the loop, so to say, right? Of that we need to be. So a lot of the so-called, I would say, executors would be orchestrators, managers, owners of things, right? And they will need to guide them. But in that way, that is, I think, where it gets really interesting because when we think about technical, then it becomes that space of how human beings and AI agents in the future not only coexist, but how they intertwine and even collaborate, if we use a metaphor for that, right? And then the question is in any collaboration, right, there's a give and take and there's clear responsibilities, with the only exception being that AI agents themselves cannot be responsible because they are still owned by human beings. So that very interesting concept of it all, I think, is what makes it so socio-technical. And although it is comes down to a governance question most of the time too, I think there's also often then a philosophical take on this, right? To think about how much are we actually, can we be responsible for something that's as autonomous AI? And that leads back to the question, can we then even be responsible for it if the AI is doing things that we cannot even predict anymore, that we don't understand why it does anymore? And that is, I think, what makes the term socio-technical even more important in today's day and age.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, going back a little bit to what you said, I do remember a movie, Willy Wonka, the Chocolate Factory, but the old one with Johnny
Right.
Depp. And when the
Yeah.
father gets fired because they got a robot that was putting the tooth cups in toothpaste, and
Yeah.
then at the end of the movie, the guy reinvented himself and he became actually the mechanical person who fixed
Exactly.
the
Yes.
machine, right?
Very
And I
good.
think this is, as you mentioned, it's an evolution.
Absolutely.
We cannot leave everything to the AI because at the end of the day, it's the machine is going to break and you need someone to do it. But maybe we need to evolve as well with the skills, as you mentioned before, right? Skilling of the people, understanding what is needed, and so on. So I feel like there are a lot of um, companies, as you mentioned, laying off people to replace it with AI. This is going to fire back at the end, right? It's going to happen
Exactly.
like there.
Exactly.
You're going to need
Yes.
to hire the people to fix that AI system. And very important, what you said, is that the human in the loop is one of the most important parts, right? Because otherwise, there is a lot of hallucinations. Of course, AI is not autonomous in the sense of fully smart or intelligent like a human being. So it
Yeah.
needs some input to give a better output.
Mhm.
And yeah, I see it this way. But when the AI initiative fails, which we see quite often, how often do you think that the root cause is human rather than technical?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would even argue most of the time, right? And the reason being that most of the failures anyway are being traced back to a human decision that was made a while ago or that was really directional for that AI initiative, right? And I think it comes back to the original business questions, right? Is this AI initiative really going to solve a business problem? And if the answer to that was no, and it was just someone came up with as an idea, and that person tried to push it through production, then no one is buying into it, right? Like, how does that justify the cost of us doing it, and what are we getting for it, right? Why are we then even doing it? So that is one reason why it fails. I think another one might be also just to consider the human resistance, right? Even if it creates business value, but change management was not applied properly, and it is perceived as threatening people's jobs, right? Then I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of just silent or loud sabotage happening, right? Of people just doing everything in their power for that AI to not threaten their jobs, so they're not being laid off. And that is another reason for it too, right? Or in another way, right, simply making the wrong technological choices, right? Let's say you need a certain type of focus on generative AI for images, but you use the wrong model and it's actually not that good to generate images. So now all of the use cases that you wanted to do to help with generating images is not working. Could also be another reason why it's failing, right? Because what was promised is not actually being delivered because of the bad technological choice. Either way, I think it's all rooted in human beings not actually either wanting to do the right thing or they don't know how to do the right thing, so they do the wrong thing, and the wrong thing leads to AI as a technology not working for an organization.
Yeah. I want to go a little bit deeper on that. What do you suggest, for example, to the organizations? How can you tie value with the AI that they are trying to, let's say, propose? Of course, you mentioned that usability part as well, right? A little
Mhm.
bit. But what could be a way for the audience here to understand, okay, I want to propose something with AI, but what should I look first in order to propose something?
Absolutely. I think actually there are two ways of doing it, and my suggestion usually is to find the middle between the two, to find kind of the middle ground. One is I would call it the following the pain approach that I also talk about in my book, right? The whole idea of it all is that AI would be valuable if it solves current problems, right? So we actually zoom in on specific personas and specific roles in the company where they have problems running a certain process, a business process, and we can see how in this process we have bottlenecks and certain issues that can be helped with AI by automating things or by delegating it into like some kind of agents, right? And that would, in my point of view, would be an incremental approach, right? So we improve the status quo a little bit better, we increase productivity a little bit, we remove some hurdles a little bit, and overall the runtime may shorten, and that means we have saved some productivity costs. However, I think there's also the opportunity nowadays to be disruptive in terms of the approach. And that means to actually almost ignore everything that's happening right now and reimagine how an ideal AI empowered business process could look like, um, and not like consciously ignoring what's happening right now and just coming up with like the best case scenario of how in a dream world this could look like. Because the idea there is that with AI, we can reinvent business processes completely, right? And what's really moving the needle would be really a new redefined process instead of just improving the current one. Because the current one was mainly assuming that human beings would still do the majority of the task. So once we think about these new disruptive business processes, and then we look at the other more incremental optimized process, I think we can find a middle ground, right? We can make preparations to move towards the more ideal world that we want to go towards, while also making steps to improve the existing and then incrementally, hopefully step by step, then reach actually the better status. But I think that is, I think, what we can actually do, right? Like, one is investigate root cause of problems, and one is reimagine a better, future with like a green grass approach and seeing how we can actually do it in the best way.
But it might make me a spicy question here because I
Okay.
like your approach, but I have seen a lot that when people want to be disruptive or very creative, they come out with things that are not even possible to do in their
Yeah,
platforms because they are not ready at all, right? So I
absolutely.
think there is a thin line, and I have seen companies stuck with the same AI strategy, trying to put
Right.
something into production for more than a year or year and a half since the LLMs, got the FOMO and the hype. I feel
Right.
that now the disruptive part of things, unfortunately, is more like a FOMO, right? Like I'm afraid to be behind my competitors. I'm afraid of
Right.
being this. I'm afraid of that. But it's not really bringing fresh ideas, as you said, right, to
Yeah.
improve things. I like, on the other hand, for example, using AI for software delivery because it's really is used as a helper, right? Not to
Yeah.
really reinvent
An
the wheel,
assistant.
but as a helper. It provides savings immediately. Once you finish that, then you have like cost reductions. Then you have the people can focus on something that matters. Also helps people to grow in careers because they can do something more complex instead of repetitive work. But what are your takes here about being disruptive, right? And being FOMO?
No, I completely agree with you. And also, I agree with many of the things are being driven by FOMO. I think, I mean, having a target picture that is very out there and very different than it currently is not necessarily wrong. We just need to have the right expectations regarding timing and what it takes to get there, right? Because what is actually not working is you have that very disruptive target picture and you think you can achieve it within a year. When in reality, that just doesn't work, right? You cannot just within a year redefine your whole company, especially if you're a big enterprise. And that is a new reality that you do, right? Like on the way, there's so many things that are going to break that you have to deal with that is just not realistic. But if you take it as like a 3 to 5 year target rather, and you try to achieve it then, and you make like a proper roadmap, what it takes to actually get there in that time to do it, it might be more realistic, right? Who knows what can be
Yeah.
done? But then at least you make the effort and you actually define it in the right way. And I think what you're saying about the FOMO is right because um, there's a generic motivation, right? I need to do AI agents because everyone is doing it, but it doesn't necessarily is become the solution for all of your problems as well, right? And we had that also already in data before, right? Like data is not because you're being data driven, no, and everyone else has to be data driven. It's not just a generic term that you just do something and you're automatically data driven. It needs to have some purpose, right? And that purpose is different and slightly tailored, needs to be tailored to different organizations. And we need to adjust it and be clear about what our purpose individually is to actually do AI transformation.
I completely agree. But nowadays it's so difficult because you see product people or some managers that go through LinkedIn, and there
Hmm.
is a lot of vendors, right, with this
Yeah,
shiny platform, do AI with this, automate that, agents here,
true.
agents there. And it's so much misinformation
Yeah,
that they get caught up in this wave, and it's really difficult to get them out of there because they are like, okay, this person has in their website powered by AI, I need to believe, which is it's sad as well, right? Because a lot of vendors are just scamming some way somehow people
yes,
with this technology.
absolutely. But in a way, right? And this is, I think, a general theme when we talk about AI and the challenges of adopting it and making it valuable. I think a lot of the mistakes were always there in the past, and we just keep on like repeating them, or we see everyone else repeating them too. Because buying tools has always been easier than making a proper transformation within a company, right? It has always been easier just to sign a check and then basically get a tool in place, and suddenly you can click on it and play with it instead of actually making it adopted and doing the work, right, of actually it becoming valuable. And with AI, the thing is, it's so much faster evolving than any of the previous technologies that we have. And it's also so quickly gaining polarized perceptions of it that it confuses everyone, right?
Yeah.
That I know that I need to do this, but I don't know how to do it. Maybe buying a tool gets me one step closer, and at least I can see it, even if I don't know what to do with it yet. It makes me feel better than not seeing it and trying to reimagine how it looks like. And in a way, I think it requires technological leaders that have experienced similar problems in the past to guide others, right? and not be caught up in the hype around technology, but actually learn from the past and try to avoid them this time for AI. I hope that all of us who are working in tech and having led and supported these kind of initiatives can help with that somehow.
Let's talk about this week. We are on January 20th today, so this is going to be released later. But the word or the phrase of the week, last week and this week, is context graph
Yeah,
or meta agents, right? And you
yeah,
see LinkedIn full of this, and then you get your
exactly.
clients asking you, "I want meta agents. I want a context graph." And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Okay, dude, you just read something, and then you're hype about it." But they don't even understand what it is and how it works. And then ontologies have been there forever, and knowledge graph have been there forever. This is not new.
absolutely.
It's just a reinvented concept with a new word. And this happens a lot
Absolutely.
also with AI, right?
Absolutely. It's like it's so funny, right? That we reinvent new terms, right? That are referring to existing things already. And just because they sound new, it gains a lot of traction. And suddenly everyone wants to do it. And yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, I feel like, right? That we are trying to, in technology, come up with these new terms just to drive a certain hype around it. And then it unfortunately already even works. And then we have to somehow roll all the way back and find the balance of how to actually use it in the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know that I just wrote this book about data products, and
Mm.
data products is not a new concept. It is something that I mentioned, right, in my
Yeah.
book. It's something that I mean, I work as a software engineer at the beginning of my career. And this is
Right.
something that I already see from software engineering that we haven't been able to transfer correctly to the data space. But all the
Absolutely.
principles are there, right? Even in my book, I put the hard framework from project management to use it in data because it's already there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but the people is so hype or afraid or confused with these new words and terms. And then, okay, let me research a little bit to see if it was set already in the 90s or in the 2000s, right? And we're
That is so
just trying
true.
to put it
Yeah.
shiny again, to make it trendy and see how it
Exactly.
goes.
No, you're so right. I think there's a lot in there because we could also position it as let's combine best practices from different worlds and apply it, right?
Mhm.
But instead, most people go for this is a whole new thing and no one has ever done this before. And now let's all get behind this. But if we would all be a little bit more honest, right, we could just say, look, we got inspired by all these best practices in the past. We're now combining this. And we think that this is going to work. And we have proof that it has worked. And it's still innovative, right? It's just more a realistic expectation setting about what it actually does and what it means. And same with context graph, right? Like all graphs contain context, right? Putting context just before it doesn't mean that it's a whole new thing. It's
Exactly.
just the whole thing of what are we trying to do here, right? It's really interesting.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was crazy. I just opened it, I think like last Monday. For some reason, I ended up talking with someone about this. And
Hmm.
then immediately on my LinkedIn, it was like, like a
A
crazy
wave of
wave
context graph.
of
Yeah.
context graph. It was the same with the LLMs came out, and then
Yeah.
with the agentic AI, and it
So
was
true.
okay. This is the new thing for the beginning of the year. Last year at the beginning was agentic, and the
Exactly.
year before LLMs, and the year before data mesh.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
I want to talk about a little bit about trust, adoption, and the human
Hmm.
constraints. So
Yeah.
even when AI systems are accurate and people don't always trust them, right? They are selectively trusting them when it really suits their narrative. So there's still some kind of people want to believe, but at the same time, they are not connected with the reality of the outcomes, or they don't trust it at all. You see this a lot probably with the clients, especially like if you see examples in retail, right? That they get a chatbot or they get something like that, and then the people is like, I don't want to talk to the chatbot. I don't feel this can resolve my things. It doesn't understand me. I'm tired, and you get a lot of bad surveys in the organizations because people feel like they are not being heard and they feel like being talking with a machine that won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
From
Absolutely.
your experience, what actually builds trust in the AI systems? Is it transparency, explainability in design, something else?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think usually, and that reflects, I think, to all technologies and how people are trusting technologies. For me, it always comes down to transparency and reliability, right? One is what is happening in there and how are things happening in this technology. And the second one is the output of the tool consistently helping and consistently of high quality and accuracy. So I can use it for what I need to do with it. Right. And I think with AI, it's the same needs, but it's so difficult to actually achieve those two things. Right. One is to actually make something transparent means it's a high explainability and high interpretability is not happening on its own, right? You have to actually make the effort to let AI and LLMs or any kind of models actually do that. And that requires additional efforts, which then becomes an additional overhead for many of the developers that they're not willing to do. But then the trade off is that very little people are going to use it because they don't know what's happening there, right? That could be. And with the reliability part of it all, right? That comes down to the nature of generative AI being probabilistic and not deterministic, right? Simply because it's based on actually statistically predicting things and not being actually deterministic of always having a fixed output, right? That can lead to a lot of unexpected results in the tonality, in the small things, in any kind of things that it kind of tries to fill in the gaps with. And because of that, it's in by nature against reliability, right? Because it's unpredictable behavior basically as the output. So as human beings, that is also very hard to deal with. I think on top, and that you mentioned that as well, with specifically chatbots, because it is trying to imitate human beings that you're chatting with, that immediately puts you into the situation where you would compare to a real human being. And that didn't happen with any other tools in the past, right? When you had like a proper interface and something where you put data in, you have never compared this to a human being that you work with, right? Only by now, because we all got used to chat at work and chat in life. Now we are chatting with a bot. We are immediately doing that comparison to a human being. And suddenly we're reminded that we actually prefer human to human connection and not talking to a machine. Because why would I spend all these efforts typing and texting a machine if I could do it with a human being too, right? So in a way, I think it triggers basically our needs for human connection, and that makes doing a bot basically interaction then the less popular choice, and you're by nature basically against it a little bit. I think those are probably the main reasons why there's so little trust. And I think the one last point is, and that is generally in trust, it's very easy to lose and very hard to gain, right? Like once you finally have the trust, you have to just do one big mistake and the trust is gone. And then you have to prove yourself over and over again until you finally gain that trust back. And I think we have the same natural reaction to AI models too, right? If it does one time a really bad thing, then it will take a lot of us to actually gain trust again. So we have to just follow human nature and kind of prevent more than actually clean up afterwards or fix afterwards, just to make sure that the trust is on a higher level continuously and we don't have to then spend the extra effort of gaining it back again afterwards.
One question here is a little bit futuristic, right? You have
Sure.
kids, right?
Yeah.
You see them, how they interact. Well, yours are still very little, but I see my son, he's a teenager, how they interact a lot with these
Hmm.
AI chatbots and so on,
Right.
right? So I
Hmm.
feel like they trust blindly without even questioning. They are losing this connection. You see this in Japan, right? In some other countries, with that there was
Right.
some news like a lady got married with an AI chatbot that she got. It was really strange. Like she had a fiance and she got this AI chatbot friend with a anime kind of photo, right? And then the chatbot started to allure her into have a relationship with her,
Oh
and
my
then
God.
she broke up with the guy, and actually, the AI chatbot proposed to her, and she married to the AI chatbot.
Oh my God.
And it was
Crazy
like, I
story. Okay.
can't believe this, right? It was even in CNN and everywhere. It was
Yeah.
kind of big in the news. And I was like, where are we going with this, right? Because we talk about here a lot in your book and everything about the human
Yeah.
side of things. But I feel that there are so many layers with the AI things that we are doing right now that might affect the future generations.
Yeah.
Even this lady, I think it was like 25, 30 years old, not that
Yeah.
young, and ditching a human relationship for an AI chatbot, I think is a little bit weird. Maybe it's over trust there. That could be like the other
Right.
side, right? Because we are more like, okay, I want to connect with you. I want to talk to you. I want to have your opinions, not talk to
Yeah.
ChatGPT all day long. But for
Yeah.
them, it's becoming a reality that this is the contact they have or what they believe in.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm going back and forth on this as well, and I don't really have like a really great answer for it. But there are two things for me that I think are coming together here. On the one hand side, of course, I think that we should not lie to ourselves and act like AI is a real human being. That is just not possible at this point. I don't know if artificial general intelligence is going to happen or not, but either way, right now, right? They are not real human beings, and we should not believe that they're real human beings. And that also means we should not think we can get married to them or any kind of these things. And that is completely clear. On the other hand, if I think about mental health and whatever we as humanity kind of learned of what helps us to improve our mental health, we have started relying openly on tools that are not human to do that, right? And what I mean by that are, for example, weighted blankets, right? We suddenly, for somehow, we figured out that blankets that are very heavy on us gives us some kind of calm. And we know that this is just a blanket that's heavy, but for some reason we just bought into it and now we think it's having us. Same with emotional support animals, right? They don't really
Yeah.
talk. They are acting a lot conditionally, but we still have them and they give us emotional support. So I'm not surprised that we took the next level to a chatbot that is now giving us emotional support that we need. But there's somewhere in the middle, right? That's what I'm trying to say. I think with
Yeah.
that same attitude of knowing openly that this is not a real human to human connection, but I'm doing this for my emotional support and it's helping me right now, we should just have the real correct expectations towards how an AI can help us in this and not act like and have the illusion that it is a human being. So somewhere in between, I think we will find a middle ground. I think there's definitely a lot of ways how AI can help with mental health, and we just need to do it in the right way. And we should not all fall into the trap of being illusioned by it and suddenly think that's real human beings.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But this is where we touch the topic of ethical AI, right?
Yes,
Like also
absolutely.
the companies, how far they will go to bring more users, right? We're talking about, for example, the new apps that we're going to get in ChatGPT, right? Is at some point, is this going to, now they are saying they're not going to get the data we put in the prompts or whatever to target you with ads. But I see this is probably the future that is going to happen as well. Data is going to be sold out. They're going to read the chats and
Exactly.
so on, right? But where is these ethical boundaries? I think we're still very, very, very early on the AI journey, and we don't have enough limitations in how you can develop these chatbots or these now advertising and so on, right? And the ethical AI reminds me, for example, the ethical of cloning. Remember Dolly, the sheep, and so on, and it's kind
Oh,
of the
yeah,
same ethical dilemma, right? That
absolutely.
okay, do we want to have something that influence how we behave as a human being? Because at the end, it's a machine just telling you what to do and how to do it. And
Yeah,
right now, it's some way somehow, let's
it's a
say,
big gray
controlled.
area.
But we don't know how much it's gonna be able to think by itself at some point.
Exactly. I think there's the two different point of views on this. On the one is, let's say from the point of view of being the big model provider. So I like OpenAI and I don't know, Google and Microsoft and all of those. With those LLMs, right? You could say that I'm only responsible for the technology and that it's possible to do. And I don't care if people are going to use it for good or for the bad. But that is not right way to think of, because you need to have guardrails in it, right? And if, let's say, bad people are doing bad things with it, just like we've seen it with Grok now and all of the problems that Grok is now in, right? Bad people are going to show up and use it for bad things. Then you have to be responsible for it, right? You are the ones who have to actually put a stop to it, and you can shut it down or not. And that is, I think, from an ethical point of view, a really interesting one, where for the very first time, we cannot even predict all of the bad things that people are going to do with AI because we just haven't considered it before. And suddenly, bad people could be ahead of the good people because they are reinventing new bad things to do with it, and we are only reactively stopping it happening. But is that really good, right? And can we really stop it on time until bad things are happening that we can maybe not revert anymore? So that is, I think, a big question that we need to ask ourselves. Now, as organizations who are using these models, right, there's of course a lot of other things. I think, to your point, a lot of companies and FOMO, right, they have a KPI for adoption. right? They're like, how many people are using Copilot? And the higher the percentage of employees are using it, the better. But that is not considering the ethical view of this, right? Are they using
Yeah.
it for the right things? And are they supposed to use this for what they're using it for? And nobody's actually checking that and overseeing that, right? As long as the percentage goes up. And that necessarily needs to be, I think, balanced and need to be seen how. And I think for me, what's really worrying are two things in the generative AI side right now, which is bias and disinformation, right? So
Oh, yeah.
bias, of course, is basically looking into specific groups of people being disadvantaged by AI models because of what the models are being trained with. And that is also another interesting thing is, right? We need as much data as possible to train these models. But the further we go back in history to get more data, the worse it gets from a humanity point of view, because we made really bad decisions in history. So if they learn from it, we're just going to amplify the same decisions from the past, right? And if we have it too little, then it might be inaccurate and might be hallucinating and stuff. So, right? So either way, that bias, how do we deal with it, right? We need to generate new ethical data, actually, to train AI again, to do the right ethical choices. But our definition of what ethical is changes over time too. So we're kind of having a moving target there of catching up with something that we're maybe never going to achieve. And I think this is something we need to consider. And disinformation, I think, comes down to either, let's say, unintended disinformation, like you take hallucinations, you don't take it and validate it, right? You just directly use it for a very important decision, and suddenly it was a wrong decision, right? Versus also intended disinformation, where you generate deep fakes and whatever, and you sell it as real, and then people believe it. I think that is all possible with generative AI nowadays too. And that is something within organizations, between organizations, bad actors, malicious actors, something that is really difficult to deal with as well. I guess I don't have a great answer on how to solve this, besides saying that every individual is responsible for seeing things, flagging things, and hoping to stop others and guide them to not do bad things with it.
I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality we have today, right? We are
Exactly.
just
Exactly.
starting with things like the EU AI Act to understand
Exactly.
to where to go. Finally, in the US, they are also implementing a few things as well. We have some other frameworks around the world, but this is just like the tip of the iceberg, right? There are so many
Exactly.
things to cover. It's like the deep web, for example, when the internet came, and there is a lot of weird things happening there, and
Yeah,
they haven't been able to control it, right?
absolutely.
And I don't think they will at any point. I think it's going to be kind of the same with AI. But what we can do as a person in an organization is to try to bring all these ethical steps. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. Talking about responsible AI often gets framed in terms of ethics, right? The checklist and governance control. But human search and design go much deeper than that. So, from your perspective, what does responsible human centered AI actually look like in a day to day in an organizational practice?
Yeah. I think, with any AI application, I like to simplify it into like a three-layered model that we are having, or like model might be the wrong word, but like a three-layered kind of framework. Because in every AI application, you have those three layers, which starts with the data layer, right? So basically, what data is being fed into it, but also what data comes out of it, and basically how do you support that model to do the right things. Then you have the model layer itself, right, which is in the end like could be a predictive modeling thing, or it could be a generative AI model, whatever it is. That's the model layer. And then you have the interface layer as well, right, which is actually how people are interacting with that model and what is happening there. And I think when we think about responsibility, then responsibility has to happen on all three layers. But unfortunately, in organizations, those three layers usually sit under very different responsibilities, right? So the data layer sits usually with data management and data owners somewhere in the business, ideally, but oftentimes still in like a central IT team. Then you have the model layer, which might happen with data scientists and happen with AI engineers somewhere that is like sitting in a center of excellence or like an innovation hub. And then you have the interface layer, which might be UX designers and web designers and web application developers and so on. They're sitting there too. So what happens then if something goes wrong is they're all finger pointing to each other of saying like whose actually's fault it is, right? But that is not responsible behavior, because as an organization, then you basically have failed to take responsibility because everyone is saying the other side is responsible. I guess the thing here is we need to build these cross-functional kind of responsibilities, right? somehow we need to find a way that we are not horizontal thinking about responsibilities, but vertically. And just like we have learned in data products to have now also that data product ownership as a real responsibility, AI product ownership or any equivalent of that would help to actually look at both these three layers as well together to actually make sense of it. And of course, it's, as you said, connected to a lot of the governance principles that we need to have, etc. But only by having then basically someone with accountability, having below that, that person can actually then take on all of the principles of responsibility and should bring it in there. To say maybe what helps though with actually defining what responsibility is, I think there's external frameworks we can use and there's internal practices, best practices that we can leverage, right? Like from an external point of view, you have the, as you mentioned, the EU AI Act that can help us guide us a little bit on how to classify by risk or think about AI literacy. There's also the NIST framework, for example, that helps with actually defining transparency targets and how to make it transparent. And from internal practices, right, you have the kind of code of conduct things. You have behavioral kind of policies, usually how you deal with information as well, that you can also put in place. I think let's again leverage what already exists and make it better so it fits also to AI. We don't have to reinvent responsibility in AI completely from scratch if we know that we can build on what we already know about responsibility and technology.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And that's why I feel like a lot of organizations still don't understand that you need to have this foundation with regular data governance to build on top
Yes,
this AI governance. Because
absolutely.
only like that you achieve this kind of security, ethics, responsibility, and human-centered decisions, right? But it's not like, okay, let's have just AI governance for the sake of AI governance because they are interdisciplinary.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and today, for example, I posted something about it's related more to regular data products, but um, data ownership is super important, and this is part of the first layer of data governance, right? Because we usually see owners just on the slides, just in Confluence. This person owns whatever, but they don't take the responsibility, right? So it needs to be accountable, responsible, and have. It's not only a tooling issue. For deliver or something, but it's also the person who is in charge of this to take this ownership. And once this responsibility is clear, the conversations become much more constructive because, as
Absolutely.
you said, they are like, oh, it's like the Spider-Man meme, like me, you know,
Yeah,
it's just like
exactly.
pointing fingers everywhere.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now that we talk a little bit about data products, I want to connect actually all these topic with data products. You know that I'm passionate about this because
Hmm.
and also about data governance because I think this is the foundation for basically everything that you do after that. Because at the end, if you have this well defined, you can easily start creating models and so on.
Yeah.
In my work, I see, of course, a lot of these AI initiatives struggle with all these. As I said, data is not being owned. No one wants to take responsibility. It's not understood. It's not designed for purpose or for use, right? So, from your perspective, why are data products such critical prerequisite for AI?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is very much in the spirit of your book, right? That it comes down to the basics of what product thinking even means and what managing a product even means. Because what are, for me, usually the key aspects of it is that one, there's always a customer centricity, right? Who is the data even for? And how does that customer or consumer of the data actually generate value with it, right? There's a certain kind of ownership and accountability on it because you have a data product owner usually, right? Of someone who actually takes on the requirements and then implements them and decides which ones are good and bad requirements and balances them against them if they're conflicting. And thirdly, there's an agreed kind of service level, right? Agreements and objectives and indicators of saying what can my product deliver and what can it not deliver. And it's clear and transparent for everyone. And all of these principles, I think, apply to AI very much as well, right? Because in the end, AI is also another type of use case that is going to use data. And if someone on the side of an AI model and the application can actually know what to expect from the data products and has clear requirements towards the data to then actually do things with it, right? Then data products are a great underlying aspect of it all to do it. I think even in the new world with generative AI, right? Data products make it very easy to create context, right? We just talked about context graphs. But what we mean is that if we actually can apply ontologies to the semantics of a data products, we have the right prerequisites in place to do that, right? With an owner that actually understands what's in there and it belonging to a business domain. It also means that we can model the context around it and we can create an ontology to put it in the right context so the application can actually do more accurate results without a lot of hallucinations and perform thereby better. So what I think is really key here is that if we want organizations all to become more AI driven, right, then having data products in place is almost a mandatory thing to do, right? Because the only way to scale AI is by scaling data. And the only way to scale data is by treating and managing data as a product.
Completely agree. Um, I'm a preacher of data products.
Of course you are. Yeah.
Because it's like very simple concept, right? It's just
Yeah.
like a product from software engineer, create an app, get your requirements, a team will own it, you refine it, you do feedback loops, right? That you
Yeah.
also have as well for in your books about these feedback loops to connect with the people, get
Yeah.
into the nitty gritty of the users, not only, okay,
Absolutely.
I think this is gonna function if I throw it out there. And I feel if we also focus all these data products that will be used to create AI products in the
Yes.
quality as well, um, this will become a better outcome for the organizations and they will have less fines, for example, less pushback from the users outside and so on. Because actually, in my book, I have one chapter about the AI products as well. They are essentially the same. But of course, we have these governor things that we spoke before, right? That is slightly different. But also, it requires more iteration loops, right? More feedback loops because AI evolves so fast. So you need to make sure you're still like getting into the compliance, that the model is not hallucinating, that it's not biased, that there is a lot of things that could happen with that data. And as you said, also the data that you train might be really messed up.
Yeah.
Um, like I remember Amazon, like it was 2018 or 19, they created a model to hire people, and because most of the software engineers were males, eventually they were only hiring males because it was discarding everything that was a female. So
Absolutely.
uh,
That's so
this is
true.
because there was not enough feedback loop, right? So they stay like this for quite some time, and I think now more than ever we need to be more human centered, get the needs, and have these conversations. Okay, what can we improve to make it better? And it's easy, even if you add in your products like the thumbs up, thumbs down or something, at least you get some feedback and you understand, okay, this is working, or maybe we should iterate and maybe make some interviews, right, to understand
Absolutely.
the user centered perspective of the people and so on.
Yeah. No, very well said. I think maybe, I mean, that could be another misconception that I'm hearing more often recently, which is we're already doing data products and a semantic layer. I think we're ready for AI, because, I mean, that means we're ready, right? And I think that itself is a not necessarily correct statement because most of the times data products, when we started with them, were recording use cases, right? This is where all of the simple recording, the simple use cases started with. It would just be dashboards and recording and all these kind of things to do it with. But the requirements that we have for AI are so different and so much more demanding than reporting use cases that the readiness doesn't depend on if you're binarily saying you're doing data product yes or no. It's about if you're able to use that data product approach to capture the requirements and implement those requirements into the products that you have. And I think it's more about using what you already can do and the processes and approaches you have and responsibilities, but now deal with also the AI requirements and not just blindly think that now we're ready, right? We're doing all of that already, so we're gonna get things done. And I think we just need to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are also a lot of organizations that I have seen, unfortunately, because that breaks my heart, where they basically name 100 tables as data products, and they are not data
Oh
products
no.
at all.
Oh no.
And you are like, okay, sure, you have data products.
Yeah.
They just literally like, let's rename it, but they don't
Yeah,
have
let's just
like
call it a data product and we're done.
yeah, yeah, or let's call it data mesh, or
Yeah,
whatever it
exactly.
is.
True.
But I wish, I mean, I think if I could wish something for this year is to see the people go more into these so we can do better AI, right? Better data
Yeah.
products means better data so we can construct better AI, more responsible, more accurate, and also usable, right? Because I see also hundreds of features on websites that no one uses because no one cares. As we mentioned before, they might be scared or afraid, or they're like, I need human contact. This is already too much for me. So again, it's AI for the sake of AI, not thinking about what could bring value to the clients or to your customers and then back to you as a company. Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have another question before we close. So, how do teams balance innovation with responsibility without slowing everything down? Because it's
Yeah.
kind of the same with data governance. You know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have the same with compliance and regulations and innovation. It's always the same question, right? I mean, I think there's two things again. One is about generally the innovation being one driver to actually generate business value. And if we look at compliance, those are things that not necessarily should have stopped us in the first place. Because if we think that these things are not stopping us from things, then we might have been working on the wrong things anyway, would be my first approach to it. Now I understand there's an additional workload because usually compliance comes with audits and comes with additional documentation efforts that you need to do because of that, right? But those are things I would say that generally have always been a good idea because they provide transparency and provide any proof of what has been done. So in the end, we can always look back into why failures happened when they happened, right? That is the thing. But this having said, I think what many companies are confused with is a very simple one, which is that you should not mix the purpose of experimentation with the purpose of production business generation use cases, right? Because on one hand side, I get it. You want to try out things, but the thing about experimentation usually is you throw them away as well, right? Like you just kind of try out things and then you come up with a way of using that in a more applicable way. But oftentimes there's this conception that we need to experiment and then we take the experiment and then we just shift it all the way to production
Yeah.
and then this is how it goes. But it's not the same. And this is also where I think we're stopping ourselves because if we apply the same principles of like being super diligent and 100% governance and all of the mechanisms, all of the experiments, then no one wants to experiment anymore, right? But if we take experiments that are very ungoverned and very much wild and we try to put them through production without having considered all of these previous aspects of governance and responsibility, then it's not going to work either, right? So I think what is very simply a very important approach is to directly have a strong kind of differentiation and purpose from the get-go. If we're doing this now with AI, this is an experiment. If we're doing this now, we actually want to solve a business problem and put it all the way to production, because then you put the right expectations and the right guardrails and responsibilities from the beginning. And you cannot then be conflicted about actually trying to mix those two worlds or blend them, but you're actually doing with a purpose. And that hopefully makes us more efficient anyway over time.
Completely agree. I have seen that a lot where they have this experimentation data scientist team and they throw it to some software engineers to productionize, but they have no
Right.
idea of everything. And they're just, let's put it there, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And most of the times it doesn't make any sense and they never make it to production because there are so many things that were not taken into consideration
Right.
that probably the DPO, the data privacy officer, is going to block.
Yeah,
So at the
absolutely.
end, they didn't, they just like, okay, we're stuck. We cannot go anywhere. And we put all this effort for nothing. And then they feel constrained because they are not being taken seriously. But if you already put some of these best practices since the very beginning, you don't have to be perfect with the governance. I think it's experimentation phase. But as you mentioned,
Exactly.
a balance, right? Like, okay, at least let's make it non-biased, let's make it transparent, like some basic governance, let's say. And then when you are going to production, you do something bigger. So talk first with your
Exactly.
data product officer, right? And try to understand what are the guidelines and what is in there, what is going to be rolled out in the next quarter from the EUAA Act, for example, or
Exactly.
something like
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tiankai, for this amazing conversation. But I would like to ask you two final questions for the audience here. So first, what's one thing leaders should stop doing if they want their AI initiatives to succeed?
I think they should stop blindly believing the hype is what I would say. Maybe to conclude and everything we said, right? Don't believe everything that everyone says. Just use your critical thinking and evaluate if it's really a new thing, if it's really the right thing, and if it's really something you need to do as well. And make up your own mind about it. And don't just blindly follow the next hype and hope that's the right thing to do.
And the second one, what's one belief about AI readiness that sounds reasonable but is actively holding organizations back?
Yeah, I think for me, that one is about the saying, good AI needs good data. And I don't mean that this is wrong completely, the sentence. It's more that it's being used now often as an excuse to not get started suddenly, right? It's that thing where that sentence can be interpreted in so many different ways that suddenly good data is being kind of interpreted as, oh, we need the perfect data foundation and all of the data needs to be in the perfect condition and 100% data quality, et cetera, when in reality that never happens, right? That is just never possible. So I think we need to be more realistic about that statement and say that good data means just the right accuracy and quality of data for a specific use case and not generalize it so much, because nowadays it feels like we're just generalizing it too much and it's being actively used to stop AI efforts for some reason.
Completely agree. Actually, when I go to a client and I'm doing an assessment for AI strategy, and we go through the use cases, I ask them, okay, can you tell me what's the level of accuracy you need for these for your clients? Because this is
Yeah,
will determine how we're going to prioritize it and what under work we need to do on top of that, right? If you tell me it's an 80% because I don't know, it's something that is not that necessary, fine. But if you tell me it's like financial information, of course you need 100% accuracy. So you need to be very
exactly.
careful there. So I think
Yeah,
this is one of the key questions that you need to ask yourself when you analyze use
absolutely.
cases.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Of course, this really highlights something that often gets lost in the AI discussion. So we were here quite bold and we touch a lot of topics.
Absolutely.
Uh, again, AI doesn't fail because models are bad, as you said. It fails because organizations aren't ready to change how decisions are made, how to build that trust, and how responsibly is shared. Basically, I think the AI readiness is not a tool set; it's an organizational capability that we should build up basically every day.
Yeah.
And thank you again for being with us. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you. So you've been listening today to Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up next time with more real talk from the front lines of data and AI. Stay data driven. Bye.